Today is Tuesday, November 22nd, and we're taking things one day at a time here on the Outside the Oval podcast, the newest running experience on the internet. You can find my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube, as well as on Instagram and Twitter at Outside the Oval. Any questions you may have may be directed to my email, outsidetheoval@gmail.com. And today we've got another jam-packed show for you today, and I'm really excited to bring this one to you. I've got a laundry list of guests today, including All-Americans Yaseen Abdalla from Tennessee and Bethany Graham from Furman. I will also once again be joined by Julian Gannan from the Runners Central on Instagram. And if you haven't already, be sure to give him a follow. And then to close out the show, I will be joined by my former teammate Sam Balboa of Queen's University to discuss some fantasy cross country and his indirect shout out from Charles Hicks during his interview following his NCAA championship victory. Before we jump in today, however, I do want to leave a little note before we begin this show. I recently invested in a new microphone. You'll be able to see it on next week's show when I do repost a YouTube video. However, during my interview with Julian, I was using my emergency headset I've been having to use in recent weeks, but now I have this beautiful new microphone in addition to a brand new webcam, which will make its debut next week. But now I have this beautiful microphone, beautiful webcam. I'm seriously making the necessary investments I felt like I needed to make. And I make this announcement because during today's show, there may be times where you hear something that might be slightly off. I did use this episode as a mini test run. I had planned to make this one viewable on YouTube. However, the way it worked just did not go according to plan. So if at any point you do notice any audio problems, for this one episode, I do put the blame on that. But moving forward, I am excited to get the kit up and running 100%. But enough of that. Let's hop right into today's episode, starting with the men's championship race. Across the board, this was a great one. To recap it a little, Nico Yun from Northern Arizona, he began to push the pace past the pack just after his 2:39 1K split, while his teammate Drew Bosley and Stanford's Charles Hicks followed suit. And behind the three, the chase pack consisted of a few other big names, such as Dylan Jacobs, Alex Mayer, Kai Robinson, and several others, but nobody really seemed to be willing to make a move to catch the three leaders. For much of the race, the three up front looked extremely comfortable, and with a K to go, as Bosley fell off just a little, it was in fact Charles Hicks who was able to break Nico Yun and pull away to win his first ever NCAA national championship. Jacobs would then go on to finish fourth, and Alex Mayer would go on to finish fifth on his home course. The individual race was a great one from top to bottom, and here to talk to me a little bit more about how that race went is Yaseen Abdalla from Tennessee, who finished 33rd this weekend at the NCAA Cross Country Championships. Yaseen, I appreciate you joining the show, and congratulations on your All-American honors this weekend. How did you feel this weekend during the race? How did you feel like that went?
Pretty bad as far as like fitness, but we executed the plan well from the gun. It was to run with Dylan for as long as I could, pretty much, and I did that, and I just faded.
Yeah, the men's individual race was incredibly competitive, and I feel like it was one of those most competitive seasons we've seen in a long time. However, you really did a great job of asserting yourself near the front of the race, competing with the likes, like you said, your teammate Dylan, Casey Cleaner, Alex Mayer, a bunch of those kind of guys. So moving forward, having this kind of experience on Saturday with 2 years of eligibility left, what do you hope to accomplish on the cross-country course?
I mean, the goal is always to win at some point. I'd like to win a title, but that was probably my worst race of the season. So I'm trying to get my confidence back up first. But yeah, want to win at some point is the only goal I have for cross now.
Absolutely. That's the best goal to have. You got your All-American title. Now you can go chase a national championship. Love hearing that. But taking a step back from cross country for a moment, with indoor and outdoor track on the horizon, what kind of goals do you have entering the new season?
I've never qualified for nationals. I've never qualified for nationals individually, so I want to get a nationals mark indoor in the 3K.
Yaseen was not the only runner in the field with a notable performance by an individual on Saturday either. Santiago Prosser, a sophomore from Northern Arizona, had a spectacular day, and I think these two really established themselves as future stars, not only this weekend, but for the rest of the season and years to come. Abdalla was spectacular throughout the season, finishing third at the SEC championships and second in the South Regional. And he really capped off his season in a big way, positioned himself to segue into stardom this track season, where I believe he is primed to be a championship contender in 2023 in the 3K. Prosser was not nearly as lethal as Abdalla was this season. Other than finishing second at the Coaching Tree Invitational in Bloomington, Prosser finished in the 30s at both the Cowboy Jamboree and Nuttycombe. However, he was silently a big part of Northern Arizona's success this season and ended up getting the job done when it mattered most, finishing 19th in the NCAA championships and during his NCAA debut. I'm incredibly excited for the future that these two young sophomores have and believe we could be seeing the start of their rise to stardom. Elsewhere during the individual race, there were a few other things I noticed or saw on social media that I wanted to point out. The first one being the fall that happened during the first 800 of the race. I was right in front of where it supposedly happened, and in fact, a gentleman behind me asked if I saw the fall happen, and he went on to say it knocked 10 plus runners over. And one of those runners is a good friend of mine, Arjun Jha of Michigan, who finished 161st, much due in part to the fall that took place early in the race. Another runner who I suspected might be a part of the fall, though, was Victor Shitsama. On the broadcast, you could see Shitsama was up near the front with Mayer and Leonard surging ahead, but you never really saw him go down. But after a while, you can't spot him. And through 1K, Shitsama went through at 223rd, which is a big reason why Oklahoma State was so far out early on in the race. However, Kyle Merber did an excellent job highlighting just how great of a job Oklahoma State did in the final 5K, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Victor Shitsama was so far back in the early stages of the race. At 3K, he would move up to 163rd, and by the 5K marker, he was all the way up to 76th. So over the course of the race, Shitsama would continue moving up. He finished 31st alongside his teammate Rory Leonard, and by my calculations from the first 1,000 meter mat to the finish, Shitsama passed 192 individuals, which obviously played a big role in why Oklahoma State was able to make this such a close race with Northern Arizona. But I am sure that is still lingering in the heads of the team, coaches, and fans. Because what could have happened if Shitsama had not gone down before the 1K? Even if he was 80th, 90th, or even if he went out with Ryan Shoppy in 157th, could have Shitsama been able to catch one more person? And not to keep speculating, but it does kind of seem like there are some people who might feel that way. Shitsama took to his Instagram on Monday and said, and please excuse my foul language here, but here's the quote: "I don't know how y'all are able to sleep after what happened Saturday. That shit stinks." Now, when it comes to the social media post, I do not think this has anything to do with his starting position or the fact that he possibly fell. I think it's safer to assume this is about the finish between Oklahoma State and Northern Arizona in the team race, which resulted in an 83 to 83 tie, which fell in favor of the Lumberjacks during the tiebreaker. And that's what we'll spend some time on next. This was one of the biggest storylines, and I think that's an understatement. This was the biggest storyline this weekend in Stillwater. Northern Arizona walking away with their third straight national championship and sixth title in the last 7 years, adding to their legacy as one of the best distance programs in our sports history. And to get off track for just a moment, the only teams I think you can compare to this stretch of dominance that we're seeing NAU have is Arkansas from 1984 to 2000, where they won 11 championships. And in all honesty, that's probably a statistic we'll never see again. Then there's UTEP, who won 4 in a row from 1978 to 1981, which included the 17-point victory in 81, which will probably never be touched again, and 2 titles in 75 and 76 before the 78 run began. Those UTEP teams are probably still the best in our sports history. And then the success shared by Coach Wetmore at Colorado and Dave Smith at Oklahoma State, both of which have happened this century. They've been fantastic, but I would go as far to say what Coach Hines started and Coach Smith has executed at Northern Arizona is already more impressive. Now, I'm sure I'm missing a few. Villanova, they had a run in the 1960s. Michigan State was a cross-country power for much of the mid-1950s. But this Northern Arizona dynasty is slowly creeping up the list, and they're starting to make a great case that they are one of, if not the best distance running dynasties of all time. But to get back on track, I apologize for going off on a tangent. This race was incredibly close. Obviously, it was finished in an 83-83 tie, which was broken by the NCAA's tiebreaker rule that pits each scoring member against one another. So, for example, NAU's number one was matched up with Oklahoma State's number one. And in this case, NAU was awarded a point because Nico Young finished second, whereas Alex Mayer finished fifth. Northern Arizona ended up winning 3-2 on this tiebreaker, which really took the air out of Oklahoma State fans in attendance. And like I alluded to earlier, it seems to really have struck a chord with the runners of Oklahoma State as well. Here to talk more about the tiebreaker between Northern Arizona and Oklahoma State in the men's championship race this weekend is Julian Gannan of the Runners Central on Instagram. So Julian, obviously the race this weekend, it was extremely tight. As I was telling you before recording today, the scene in Stillwater was incredibly dramatic. I was surrounded by Oklahoma State fans near the finish line who erupted on two separate occasions while the unofficial results were being updated on the big screen. And I'll be honest, it was hard not to root for the Pokes to pull it off this weekend, being surrounded by all their fans. And on occasion, it showed Oklahoma State pulling away with the victory, 63-104. Another time, 83-84. It was, like I said, very dramatic, but it made for a terrific finish, but ultimately very sad for the home team. But, of course, the big story coming out of it was how the tiebreaker was broken. And to my knowledge, in most states, the high school tiebreaker goes to the sixth man. And I'm sure that's what most people are familiar with. And that seems to be what I thought. Heading into this race, I wasn't really sure on how it worked either. And last week's guest, Jonathan Galt of Let's Run, tweeted following the race, the rule was, quote, "The NCAA tiebreaker rule is stupid. Ties in cross country should be broken by the sixth runner. Everybody knows this." So, Julian, I'll let you speak on it a little. What did you think of Saturday's championship race, and what do you think of the tiebreaker rule currently in place?
Yeah, I thought the race was just really great to watch. I was watching it on ESPNU back home, and yeah, super exciting. I mean, had really everything. So many unexpected heroes for both NAU, Oklahoma State. A couple guys coming in super clutch. It was a really exciting race to watch. Also, the commentary was really good. Kyle Merber was amazing. I love hearing him speak. Yeah, really exciting coverage. And then with regards to the tiebreaker, I do like bringing back that six-man tiebreaker rule. But regardless, I think NAU were worthy of winning. And I'd like to see the six-man rule maybe come back, but yeah, it was great to watch.
Absolutely, and I kind of share a different opinion from you, actually, and probably many of those on the internet, like I just kind of explained. Personally, I think the sixth runner rule is fine, and it really encapsulates the true cross-country racing. Definitely don't oppose it being implemented. It gets the entire team involved. It makes every point matter, regardless of where you're scoring, in more ways than one. However, I think I am an even bigger fan of the tiebreaker currently in place. Entering this week, I wasn't too sure of the rule and how it was interpreted. Just mentioned that not too long ago. But after this week, I think everybody has a clear understanding of it, considering the implications it had at the end of the day. We score 5 runners, though, at every race. No matter what, you have to have 5 runners to have a team score. And I think there are situations, and these are very rare, especially at the NCAA National Championships, but this was applicable to my own team this fall. What happens if a team is only scoring 5? So running at Kansas State, we've had a few occasions where we've only scored 5. And then, like I said, in my 2 years at NCAA cross country, this has happened on multiple occasions. It's not just happened once. So in theory, if my team were to make it to nationals, what happens if we go to 5? So that's just how my team was built, considering our team's budget and all. I don't think we should penalize a team for only having 5 runners on the team, and I feel like that should be a sentiment shared by many. Now, I don't think they should be penalized. I like the current rule for that reason. And the fact that this makes every spot matter inside the scoring 5 just makes the meet more important. I loved how it came down to the 3-2 split. Heartbreaking for Oklahoma State. But at the end of the day, had one more Oklahoma State runner beat one more individual anywhere on the course, they would be champions. And at the end of the day, that's ultimately what it all came down to. But this current rule, also encourages head-to-head competition between the top teams, which I really like and would like to see it stay moving forward. And that's my next question for you. Moving forward, do you expect this rule to be examined and possibly changed? Because I do think that NCAA is going to investigate this, check in on the rule, and see if they should move to the sixth man. But what's your opinion on that? Do you think the NCAA will move towards possibly changing it?
I think they'll definitely look at it, but I don't see them changing it. I mean, it's never happened before, right? I think it was 1 point was the closest team finish. I think it's at Villanova back in the day, I'm pretty sure it was.
It's only happened on one time an occasion. It happened in like the 30s, I think, and that's before 40s maybe.
Long ago,
and they just tied.
Yeah. Yeah, so I see them definitely investigating it, but I don't see them changing it. Yeah. But we'll see.
Yes, definitely something they need to investigate, and I do expect this rule to be examined moving forward, especially since the host school getting the short end of the stick in this situation. And I think that adds more fuel to the fire, and that's why there's so much outrage about it. There's more emotion involved because it was Oklahoma State losing the tiebreaker on their home course, and I think that's ultimately why it will be investigated. However, I would like to see the rule stay. I think it does, and it will be interesting to see what the NCAA does moving forward. And before I let you go, let's dive into the NAU Oklahoma State battle just a little bit more. Of course, Nico Young and Drew Bosley, they took it out from the gun. We saw shades of the 2017 National Championship with Mac Baxter and Tyler Day on display, which really warmed my heart, being such a big fan of the race in specific. However, the heroes of the day, in my opinion, were Brody Hasty and Santiago Presor, who edged out many guys at the line to help the Lumberjacks win their third straight title. And although Santiago, he lost his individual assignment to Oklahoma State in the tiebreaker to Oklahoma State's 3, who also in turn had a spectacular race, Santiago had a career day for himself. He secured All-American honors, and he really cemented himself as a contender for the foreseeable future, only being a sophomore. And that's something I have mentioned or will mention during today's show. However, it was really Brody Hasty who had the biggest impact on the tiebreaker for this team in the championship race, at least in my opinion. There's a video out there showing Hasty's finish, and he showed tough grit after a pretty difficult season for him. And he really struggled at times, and he deserves all the credit he's been given this weekend. Hasty, he beat out 7 other All-Americans and 2 Oklahoma State Cowboys by less than 2 seconds at the line, which was just enough to give NAU the win. So before I let you go, Julian, I've got to ask you this. Taking a look up and down NAU's and Oklahoma State's roster, where else do you think the race was won and lost, given our expectations for specific individuals?
Yeah, I think I was really surprised with Fayud Masayudi, the third man for the Cowboys. He had the race of his life and couldn't have done a better job. And the fact that they still just lost from that tiebreaker is it's pretty sad. But as you mentioned, Brody Hasty and Santiago Prosser, they came in clutch. And we've seen it before from Hasty. The last 2 times he's been an All-American. He always seems to, do the job at the right time. He wasn't great this year, but he really just had the race of his life again. And again, he keeps doing it, so yeah.
Absolutely. We've seen Hasty. He gets the job done when it matters most, and I certainly think you could make the case that anybody involved in this 14-man battle could have tipped the scales in the team's favor, from Will Muirhead or Ryan Shoppey for Oklahoma State. I think they could have even played a part had it been maybe a year later. I think those two are primed for individual success moving forward. But I really think Alex Mayer not going out with Nico Young, Drew Bosley, and the eventual champion Charles Hicks was unexpected and could have been the deciding factor. However, I don't want to throw shade or throw a pity party for Oklahoma State. You can't get mad at the kid for finishing 5th in his first cross-country season in the spotlight. Mayer has an incredibly bright future, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did come out victorious next season, if he does choose to stay in Stillwater one more year. But Julian, it was great having you on, and I look forward to having you on the show again.
Thanks so much, Gavin. Likewise.
Up and down the card, the men's team race was great. Outside of NAU and Oklahoma State, there were a lot of other interesting things that happened. Before Saturday, I was pretty vocal that I believed this race would be won with depth. That's why I thought Oklahoma State still had a shot. That's why I thought BYU could win. And obviously, that's why I thought Stanford, the consensus favorite, had a shot too. Of course, we were not aware of Cole Sprout's hamstring injury until the morning before the race, but Stanford across the board fell short of expectations. This was not the race I, and I'm sure many others, expected them to have. Devin Hart, Thomas Boyden, and Mika, whose last name I won't even try to pronounce as I'm sure I'll butcher it, all had spectacular seasons. But they came up short Saturday, and that's the simple fact. However, they really pushed the Stanford program into the limelight and helped turn them into a national power for years to come. And I really think that's what this team is going to be remembered by at Stanford. And then there's BYU, who I picked to win this week, who also fell short of what I thought they would do. During the race Saturday, I think it was around 7K, I actually thought this BYU team was really going to win. I took a look up at the big board, and I was like, this team, Aiden Troutner was moving up. Joey Noakes was moving up and through the field. Noakes made it as far as 22nd, but he ended up finishing much further back in 52nd. Christian Allen and Aiden Troutner, who I mentioned before, they can be put in that same boat. They both finished further back than I anticipated in 47th and 48th. But hey, that's cross country. Bad races happen, and at the end of the day, there are a lot of great finishes and unexpected breakout races. So you can't be too critical of these guys. But if I definitely think that BYU, like Stanford, fell short of expectations Saturday and definitely could have pulled off a victory. Elsewhere, Wake Forest, they finished fifth, which was where I was thinking of putting them for much of the season, ahead of a struggling Tulsa team without a true number one and a struggling fifth runner, but changed my mind at the last second, and Tulsa would end up finishing ninth, proving me to be wrong. NC State, they finished 11th. That was 7 spots ahead of where their pre-national ranking was, and this all came behind Ian Shacklin's All-American finish. Oregon, Harvard, and Texas all also had impressive days to go along with the Wolfpack, finishing inside the top 20, while Colorado State and Georgetown, two teams I believe could have been or should have been left out of the big dance, struggled mightily, finishing 28th and 31st respectively. And that was the men's race. It was a loaded race full of exciting storylines. However, there were none as exciting as this story I read actually the day after. Wisconsin, they had this wager. Basically, the 7th finisher for the Badgers had to buzz their head after the race, and unfortunately for freshman Adam Spencer, he was the final finisher on the Badgers team, 6th place finish, and he had to get his hair cut in Stillwater following the race. And for those of you on Instagram, you can head on over to Runner Space to check out Adam's new haircut, which his teammates earned, and it made for some interesting content. But I am sure Adam Spencer is just fine taking a haircut for a 6th place finish at Nationals. Unfortunately, the girls' race was just as exciting as Adam Spencer's haircut, and we still have that entire race to talk about, so we'll jump right into it. Again, to recap this race, Parker Valby from Florida took this race out from the gun, and she looked incredible. I said this on last week's show. I've never seen a runner, male or female, look as strong as she did in the final 1K. And once again, in Stillwater, Valby was moving. And at 4K, she had a 13-second lead on Caitlin Tui from NC State, who closed the gap on Valby. And with one turn to go, Tui made the pass for the win, putting 3.3 seconds on Valby in the final stretch. And unlike the South Regional, Valby did not have it that final K, but it was a great race from start to finish, and Tui executed this one beautifully. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure if if Valby slowed down, because I think it was honestly just Tui going out there and dominating the race from the get-go. She was incredible, and it made for an incredible race. With that being said, Parker Valby's lead, it was legit. Like I said, she had over 13 seconds on Tui, but coming down the hill at 4K, Tui made an incredible, strong, and passive move past the peloton and started her kick. And really, that kind of what ended the race for Parker Valby. One thing many people noticed on the broadcast was that Caitlin Tui came off each turn pressing the gas, but that wasn't Tui's only advantage she had over Parker Valby. I saw a lot of commotion on social media and also noticed this myself during the race, but Valby did not run the tangents. Well, did that make the difference? Well, Tui did, and that probably is what made the big difference in the race. Would have it been enough to fend off Tui? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But it was at every turn that I saw Valby run more than she had to, and that absolutely could have played a role in her running out of steam late in the race. But after the race, Valby even owned up to this error, admitting she does not typically run tangents despite her coach's advice. This is certainly something Coach Selensky will fix over the next 9 months. And luckily for the two, there are no tangents on a track. And as far as I can tell, Valby is still the most talented and best female distance runner in the sport, and I would consider her the favorite in the 5,000 meters to take down the defending champion this winter and spring. Elsewhere, there are a few other standout individual performances. Kelsey Chamel ran spectacular for the Wolfpack, giving them a lethal 1-2 punch in the team scoring. Freshman Natalie Cook, who I was outspokenly a fan of entering Saturday, finished sixth, when once again showing why she has such a bright future in the sport. As she adds mileage, she is going to become one of the most dangerous distance runners in our sport. And then Alabama's Amaris Tenisma looked to have returned to her old self, finishing ninth, helping this Alabama team finish third. On Friday, I also made a post on social media naming my sleepers for Saturday's championship race. Those two for the women's race were Ohio State's Addie Engel and Furman's Bethany Graham. Engel, she finished 10th and led the Buckeyes to a 15th place finish, exceeding expectations many had for her. And then Graham had an excellent race herself. In fact, joining me today to talk a little bit more about the women's championship race that happened this Saturday is Bethany Graham of Furman. Bethany, you had quite the day in Stillwater, finishing 27th, earning yourself All-American honors. I appreciate you joining the show for a few minutes today. Could you talk a little bit about your experience at Nationals and how the race went this weekend?
Oh, thank you so much for your kind words about the race. Yeah, it was awesome. Honestly, really happy with it, even if like the last 800 wasn't exactly how I wanted it to go. It was a great experience, definitely a lot better than my first time there freshman year. Would have been great to have the team with me, but unfortunately the at-large bids didn't work in our favor this year, but hopefully we won't have to rely on that in the coming years. It was just super exciting just being a part of such a historic race. I feel like a lot of people said that it was one of the best races of all time. I mean, such a crazy race for the individual title between Caitlin and Parker, and it was just really cool to kind of be in the field and be a part of that.
Absolutely. It was a great day in Stillwater. Very fortunate to have also been there as a spectator. But that Oklahoma State course, at least from my perspective as a spectator there, it was beautiful. I thought they did a great job maintaining it, and it really led to great racing, like you said. So real quickly, I'd love your opinion on this. What did you think of the OSU Griner family cross-country course in Stillwater as a whole? And would you ever want to race there again?
So it was kind of funny, actually. The first time we raced it was the weird cross-country nationals in March, my freshman year. And I don't think any of us were prepared. I mean, we've been training for track, and it was kind of oh, we're just going, for fun. And none of us had any idea what racing NCAA cross was like. And so it did scar me a little bit. Honestly, that was probably the hardest race of my entire life. And we didn't get a chance to race it this past season. So I was really interested to see what I would think about it the second time. I kind of went in knowing, it's definitely going to be a lot better just because I've actually trained on hills and stuff, and actually been doing cross country training. And I'm also I feel way further ahead than I was my freshman year. I thought the footing was great. That was honestly the best thing about the course is how wide it was. There was really no place where you had to kind of watch out and be could roll my ankle there kind of thing. And I feel a lot of times you do have to worry about that, especially at courses we've raced on Louisville. The footing's not actually that great. So it was nice to not have to worry about that. Definitely did not complicate things. It is a very difficult course. Just all those hills, definitely they're not necessarily super big other than that first one on the second loop. But they're just kind of rhythm busters, and it can definitely get your quads. My quads are still feeling it a couple days later just from having to constantly go up and down and just trying to keep that momentum going. But I definitely enjoyed it. I'm not sure if I would ever want to race it again. I'm kind of glad checked it off the bucket list. Don't necessarily have to go back unless we go to a meet there or something like that. But definitely a great course to have a championship race on. Great for spectating, and I feel it seemed easy to watch based on the TV stream. I don't know. My teammate said it was really cool to see. So
for sure, yeah, I thought Oklahoma State did a great job of kind of preparing the race. But if you take a step back, look at your whole season, you ran pretty well this year. You opened the season with a win at home. You mentioned this race already, finished second at Louisville, and I agree with you. I ran there as well. Definitely wasn't the best footing. And then you won the Southern Conference Championship as well. So taking a look at the entire season, what are some takeaways you have from this cross-country season that can help you prepare for the next one?
Yeah, honestly, like looking at the season as a whole, I'm pretty happy with it. It wasn't really what I envisioned for myself this time last year, but I was injured for pretty much the whole summer. I only really started training like the first week once we got back to campus. And so I wasn't really sure what the season was going to look like. And so it had far exceeded my expectations from that. I was honestly just going to be happy if I was like racing and like doing pretty decently for the team. And so the fact that I like made it back to nationals and like placed higher, I'm just like over the moon with that. Last year I was injured at nationals as well. And so honestly, I was just really happy to get 40th, and I had definitely pretty big goals for myself this year. I really wanted to try and target that top 20, but there's so many good women in the NCAA right now. I mean, there is every year, but I feel like the competition has just leveled up like so much with the incoming classes that have been coming in the past couple years, and all like with COVID, all the extra eligibility. It's just full of talent right now. And so I'm just really grateful to have like had a good season. Like the team had a great season. I mean, we didn't make it to nationals, but we definitely like have improved a lot from where we were last year. And that was like really cool to just go to some meets and kind of like actually be like focusing on the team race and like really, making that a big point to focus on during the season. And I enjoyed it, and I'm excited for cross again next year already. I'm already thinking about it.
And lastly, before I let you go, we have an exciting few weeks ahead of us before the indoor season kicks into full gear. So Bethany, I'd love to hear some of your goals for the upcoming track seasons, whether that's on the outdoor track or on the indoor track. What do you hope to accomplish during your junior season?
Yeah, honestly, one of my biggest goals finishing this cross season was just to finish it healthy. I feel like pretty much every off season I've just been dealing with like little injuries that have kind of set me back. And so it's definitely put a hindrance on like the past track season, especially. So I'm really just hoping to PR. I'd really like to be kind of competitive in indoor. I know like the indoor meet's super hard to make. And like, again, there's just so much talent, but I really like to at least be in the conversation and kind of like fighting for one of those spots. And I'd really like to make it to outdoor nationals and like have a few other girls from Furman qualify. It'd be great to like run in the 1540s or like under in the 5K. And I'd really like to run the 15 a little bit more and maybe try 10K. We'll see. It's definitely like up in the air, but I'd love to just kind of run some big races and like race against some great people and continue trying to just keep pushing forward. So yeah, that's what I want. Staying healthy. That'd be great.
Absolutely. That's the name of the game, having fun, staying healthy. And it's awesome to hear that you're willing to try kind of the 15 to the 10K. Always nice to hear when runners have a lot of range. But Bethany, I wish you the best of luck moving forward. And I'm so glad we could find a time to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
The women's race was also incredibly exciting. As I mentioned before, NC State pulled off the victory over New Mexico in decisive fashion, 114 to 140. New Mexico, once again, they packed it in, putting all 5 runners between places 20 and 34. But I've said it once, Tui and Chemel, they were excellent. Bush and Moreno, they were All-Americans as well. And it was just too much for this New Mexico team to overcome. Alabama, they were excellent. They finished 3rd, and they were followed by Oklahoma State in 4th, and North Carolina stunned everybody, finishing 5th despite entering the day ranked 13th. Kelsey Harrington earned All-American honors for the Tar Heels in 13th place, and Brendan Brown nearly joined her in 42nd. And then Virginia, who finished 9th, and Florida State, who finished 18th, were 2 other overachievers in the women's race, whereas Stanford, Michigan, and Colorado State came up just short of expectations at the national meet again this season. And joining me on my last segment is Sam Balboa. Sam currently runs for the University of Queens of Charlotte in North Carolina. Not only that, but Sam is a head coach of one of the 12 fantasy teams in my fantasy cross-country league. Sam, you had a pretty good season this year. In the 2 seasons you participated, you've made the championship both times. And like I said, this year you finished 4th in the championship race, and you finished the regular season in 2nd, going 4-1, with your only loss coming to yours truly. So Sam, thank you for joining me today, and I'm super excited to have you here to close out the show.
Thanks for having me, Gavin. I'm super pumped to be on this podcast. I'm a big fan.
As many people saw during the ESPN coverage of the NCAA championship, Charles Hicks gave a very special shout out to someone during his post-race interview with John Anderson. Hicks said, "I want to celebrate with my coach, Kyle Merber, my fantasy cross-country coach." And of course, most of the country assumed Kyle Merber was in fact his actual fantasy cross-country coach. But in the only fantasy cross-country league that actually matters, Sam, you in fact owned Charles Hicks on your roster, drafting him number 2 overall. So before we get started, I have to ask, how long did you have this in the works with your top runner, Charles Hicks?
Gavin, I had it works for a little while. I was coming in still eligible for this NCAA season. I wanted first pick. I knew if he was available, I was going to take him first round. And Kobe Williams passed up on Charles Hicks for just who he took, but I saw him. I was like, I got to have this man on my roster. So I had it in the works for a few months. Really had my eye on him.
So all kidding aside, like I said, you had a very strong finish this year in fantasy cross country. In your first year, you kind of stumbled your way into the championship. I know you and I will disagree on that. But this year, you really drafted a good team, which was certainly a top team throughout the season. I'd argue it was number 2 heading into the championship. But you guys kind of fell flat at nationals, and that happens. We see that every year, and your team was a casualty this year. And I know this is kind of an unconventional question for a running podcast, but in all seriousness, what is your strategy entering each fantasy cross-country draft? What went well for you this year during the draft and this year during the season?
Gavin, I looked at last season. I looked at what I did right. I looked at what I did wrong. I thought this season it's gonna be mine. I'm gonna come in strong. I'm gonna come in hard, and I'm gonna come in fast. And it's gonna be my season to win. And I tried to make that happen. I looked at the roster after the first 2 rounds, or not the roster, the just runners that were eligible for NCAA season. And I looked at them. I see who's been picked, who hasn't, and I picked the top person who has not been picked. And I put him on my roster, and it's worked pretty well. So I will probably continue doing just that.
Absolutely. Entering the season, I think most of us assumed you were going to take Nico Young number 1, so it was kind of a surprise seeing you take Charles Hicks. But that's kind of when I told a few people I think Sam's team is going to be for real. You followed that up. You took Kip Sane. You had Aaron Bienfeld, 2 guys who benefited your team greatly. I think you had Hilliard Chariot, Isaac Akers, who finished great. You had a really solid squad this year, and I think this year more than most, even though it was even more competitive, we had a lot more fun. It became more than just something we do during the 2 or 3 months during the fall cross-country season, but instead it became an integral part of our lives in a way. We posted news, we had funny press conferences, which I know you had a great time doing, and I feel like everyone had a great time just participating in the league, more so in previous years at least. So my next question for you is, what makes fantasy cross-country fun for you? Not only am I genuinely curious, but as a person who puts this on every year, I'd love to know what I could be doing better.
For me, I really liked just kind of not really environment, I guess it is, because none of us are really together, but just the atmosphere and the group chat. Even people that I didn't really know, like Michael and Luke, I still feel like I know them, because the news articles are just talking about things that we all know about and people we all know about. It's so funny to just be in class one day, and then I see the new fantasy cross country article dropped. I get so excited to read them. They're always so funny. That's probably my favorite thing.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that, Sam. With that being said, I apologize for not coming up with a preview article for the Fantasy Cross Country Championship. Hectic week on this side of things. However, I do have a very special post-season article coming out this week. Very excited for it. So you're the first to know about that. But before I let you go, I have to redirect this conversation back to Charles Hicks and his comments following the championship victory. Of course, I'm fairly positive this was not directed at our Fantasy Cross Country League or you, the rightful coach of Charles Hicks, unfortunately. But I do think there will be opportunities to make this league more mainstream moving forward because of things like this. I think getting runners involved in some form or fashion, no matter how insignificant, would be incredibly exciting and add a whole other layer for us, the head coaches and runners participating in the league. But I think the question everyone wants to know, or at least those in our league do, did you try and reach out to Charles Hicks about his comments last Saturday, or did you reach out to any other runners during the season for that matter?
Gavin, I actually did reach out to Charles Hicks after his victory. I know you think this was not directed towards our league, but I like to think it was. I like to think, me and Charles got a little something special after this great season. I should have been first. We had a couple runners drop the ball. I'm not too happy about it, but I did reach out. I said, hey, Charles, congrats on the race. I noticed you shouted out your fantasy cross-country coach. I don't know if you're aware, but that is me, Sam Balboa. Congrats, just good job on the win. So I kind of reached out to him. He was the only one I really reached out to.
It was great having Sam on the show to talk some fantasy cross country, but that's all I've got for you guys today. Again, I apologize for any possible audio problems. As I learn the ropes of this new microphone over the next week, this production will become a whole lot smoother. But for the time being, be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter on @OutsideTheOval, and catch me on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and YouTube. But for now, I'll catch you guys all next time on the next version of Outside the Oval.